Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Always.
Today, we're going to be talking about something pretty amazing. The connection between horseshoe crab blood and, well, how safe modern medicine is.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable.
I bet a lot of people listening are like, wait, what?
Right.
What do these, ancient creatures have to do with the medicines we take? I mean, these guys have been around, what, like 450 million years, something like that?
Something like that, yeah.
And they hold this secret, something that's essential for making sure our vaccines are effective and our pharmaceuticals.
And medical devices too.
It's all about their blood.
It's all about that blue blood.
Blue blood. Okay, you got to tell me, what makes their blood so different from ours?
Well, it all starts with how they carry oxygen. See, our red blood cells, they use hemoglobin, right? It's got iron in it. That's what makes it red.
Yeah.
Horseshoe crabs, they use a protein called hemocyanin.
Hemocyanin.
Yeah, and it's got copper in it. That's what gives their blood that blue color.
Interesting.
But that's not even the coolest part.
Oh, there's more.
Oh, yeah. You see, their blood has these specialized immune cells called amebocytes.
Amebocytes, all right.
And these amebocytes are super sensitive. They can detect even tiny, tiny amounts of bacterial endotoxins.
Okay, hold on. I got to stop you there for a second. I know we're talking about science and all, but you got to break that down for me.
Sure.
What exactly are endotoxins, and why are they such a big deal?
So basically, endotoxins are toxins released by certain bacteria,
Okay.
gram-negative bacteria to be specific. And even teeny, tiny amounts can be seriously harmful.
Harmful how?
We're talking fever,
Yeah.
sepsis,
Oh, wow.
even death in some cases.
That's scary stuff.
Yeah. So you can see why it's so important to make sure that anything, that goes into our bodies, medicines, medical devices, anything like that, it's got to be completely free of these endotoxins.
I'm starting to see where the horseshoe crabs come in. They can help us avoid these endotoxins somehow?
Exactly. It all comes down to those amebocytes we talked about.
Right.
The way they react to endotoxins.
So what happens?
Well, when the amebocytes encounter endotoxins, they trigger this chain reaction in the blood.
A chain reaction.
It causes the blood to clot or gel around the endotoxin, basically trapping it, like a little security system.
Wow, that's incredible. Nature's so smart. But how did we figure out we could use this natural defense system for our own benefit?
So back in the 1950s, there was this researcher, Frederick Bang, and he noticed something really strange while he was working with horseshoe crabs.
What did he notice?
He was injecting bacteria into the crabs, and their blood would clot up.
Ah.
It turned out it was the amebocytes reacting to the endotoxins that were in the bacteria.
Ah, I see. So that's how we learned about this.
Yeah, and that discovery led to the development of the LAL test.
The LAL test?
Stands for Limulus amebocyte lysate. It harnesses the power of those amebocytes to test for endotoxins.
Ah, so that's how they check like IV solutions and stuff to make sure they're not contaminated.
Exactly.
So how does the LAL test work? Like what actually happens?
Well, you can think of the amebocytes as tiny little guards patrolling our medicines and medical devices, and if they come across any endotoxins, boom, they set off the alarm by forming this gel-like clot.
That's a pretty simple but effective way to do it.
It is, right?
It's like a built-in safety check powered by nature.
Exactly.
So there's just one type of LAL test.
Actually, there are three main types, each with a different level of sensitivity.
Okay, so tell me about them.
Sure. The most basic one is the gel clot test. It's kind of like a simple yes or no.
Gotcha.
Then you've got the turbidimetric test. It
Mhm.
measures how cloudy the solution becomes because of the clotting.
Okay.
And then the most sensitive one is the chromogenic test. That one uses a color change to signal if there are any endotoxins present.
Wow, so it's like having different levels of security depending on what needs to be tested.
Exactly.
It's incredible to think that these ancient creatures play such a big role in keeping us safe. They're like the unsung heroes of modern medicine.
I agree.
But it makes you wonder, how sustainable is it to rely on horseshoe crabs for this?
Yeah, it's an important question.
And I know there are some concerns about how the blood is collected.
Right.
We've got to talk about that. Yeah, I read that they bleed the crabs. That sounds kind of intense.
Yeah, it's something that scientists and conservationists are, well, they're working on it, trying to make sure it's done as ethically as possible.
So to get those amebocytes we were talking about, they actually have to like draw blood from the horseshoe crabs?
Right. They carefully collect the crabs, usually from shallow waters where they gather to spawn.
Okay.
And then they take them to these special facilities and extract a small amount of blood.
So like a blood donation.
Kinda, yeah. Just like with humans, they only take a small percentage. Got to make sure it doesn't hurt the crab.
And then what, they just let them go?
Yep, back to the ocean as soon as possible.
That's good. But even with all these precautions, it can't be totally harmless, right? I mean, being captured, transported, having your blood drawn, it's got to be stressful.
You're right, there is some level of risk. Studies have shown that the whole process can cause stress, make them more vulnerable to predators, maybe even disease.
And you mentioned earlier how important horseshoe crabs are to the ecosystem.
Oh, absolutely.
I remember reading that article about migratory shorebirds, how they depend on horseshoe crab eggs for food.
Right. Those birds time their whole migration around when the horseshoe crabs are spawning.
Wow.
The red knot, for example. It makes one of the longest migrations of any bird, and those eggs are crucial fuel.
So if, like, horseshoe crab numbers go down, that could have a ripple effect on all these other species.
Exactly. It's a delicate balance. And that's why it's so important to find, alternatives to using their blood.
Well, speaking of alternatives, you mentioned something called recombinant factor C earlier.
Oh, yeah. RFC.
RFC. Can you tell me more about that? Is that a viable option?
It's really amazing what they've been able to do. Scientists have isolated the gene that's responsible for producing the clotting factor in the amebocytes.
Okay.
And they've figured out how to put that gene into other cells they can grow in a lab.
So they're making a synthetic version of what the horseshoe crab does naturally.
Yep, that's exactly it.
That's incredible. So no more need for the crabs at all.
Theoretically, no. We could have this consistent and sustainable supply of RFC without having to take anything from the horseshoe crabs.
That sounds great, but how accurate is it? Does it work as well as the LAL test?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And the good news is the research is really promising. Studies have shown that RFC is just as sensitive, just as effective as LAL. So same level of safety for medical products.
Wow, so why aren't we using it more if it's so great?
Well, there are a few things. One is just inertia, I guess you could call it.
What do you...
LAL has been the gold standard for so long. It's just what everyone's used to.
So it's about changing minds and updating those guidelines to reflect what's available now.
Exactly. And that takes time. But it is happening. Regulatory agencies all over the world, they're starting to recognize RFC as a valid alternative.
That's great to hear.
Yeah, I think as more and more companies start using RFC, we'll see a big shift away from relying on the horseshoe crab blood.
So is RFC the only alternative out there?
No, actually. There's another one that's pretty promising. It's called the monocyte activation test, or MAT.
MAT.
Yeah. It uses human blood cells to detect the endotoxins.
Wait, so we can use our own blood?
Well, specifically monocytes. They're a type of white blood cell.
I see.
And like the amebocytes, they release certain molecules when they encounter endotoxins. So we can measure those molecules and see if a sample's contaminated.
That's fascinating. So it's like we're using our own immune system to make sure our medicines are safe.
Yeah, pretty cool, right?
So is NA as accurate as LAL and RFC?
It seems so, yeah. Studies have shown that it's pretty comparable in terms of sensitivity.
So we have all these options. That's great news. But are there any downsides to any of these alternatives, I mean?
Well, nothing's perfect, right?
Right.
With MAT, it can be a little more complex to run the tests than with LAL or RFC.
How so?
It needs special equipment. You need people who are trained to use it properly.
Makes sense. What about RFC? Are there any potential issues there?
Well, because it's synthetically produced,
Hmm.
there's always a chance that there could be some variation between different batches.
Oh, okay.
So quality control is really important.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, it sounds like there's a lot of research going on, a lot of progress being made. It's really encouraging to see that we're moving away from, relying on the horseshoe crab blood, working towards protecting these amazing creatures.
Definitely. It shows that, we can find solutions that benefit everyone, humans and the environment.
It's a good reminder that our health is, like, totally tied to the health of the planet. So what else can we do? I mean, besides, hoping for these alternatives to take over,
Right.
what's being done to help horseshoe crabs right now? I know we talked about habitat loss before. What about that?
Yeah, habitat loss is a huge problem for so many species.
It is. And for horseshoe crabs, they need those coastal areas to breed.
Right. And we keep building and developing right on top of them.
Exactly. But there are some initiatives in place to try and protect those areas.
Like what?
Well, there are organizations that are working to, set up protected zones and to push for stricter regulations on coastal development.
Mm,
to minimize the disruption to those nesting sites.
that makes sense. I was reading that study about horseshoe crabs getting caught in fishing gear, too.
Oh, yeah. That's a big problem.
They're not even the target. It's like accidental.
Right. It's called bycatch. They get
Yeah.
caught in nets that are meant for like conch or eel.
And that can really hurt their populations.
It does. But people are working on that too.
Oh, that's good. They're trying to, design fishing gear that's less likely to trap the horseshoe crabs.
So like what kind of changes are they making?
Well, things like escape panels,
Yeah.
parts of the net that'll let the horseshoe crabs get out,
Yeah.
or using bigger mesh sizes so they don't get stuck in the first place.
Those are good ideas. So it sounds like there's a lot of work being done. What can we do to help? I mean, besides, donating to conservation groups and stuff.
Well, I think the biggest thing is just spreading the word. The more people know about this, the more likely they are to care.
Right. Right.
So tell your friends, share articles on social media,
Right.
even just talking about this deep dive, could spark someone's interest.
Yeah. Get people thinking about these amazing creatures.
Exactly.
Well, this has been a really, really fascinating deep dive. We've learned so much about horseshoe crabs, their blue blood, their vital role in medicine, the challenges they're facing.
Yeah.
Looking back, what do you think is the most important thing for people to remember?
I think the big takeaway is that we're all connected, Human health, the environment, it's all intertwined.
Yeah, we can't just focus on one without considering the other.
Right. What we do to the planet, we do to ourselves, ultimately. And the horseshoe crab is a perfect example of that.
It really makes you appreciate how much we rely on the natural world
It does.
and how important it is to protect it.
Absolutely.
Well, a huge thank you to our expert for sharing all this incredible knowledge with us. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this journey. We hope you've enjoyed learning about these fascinating creatures. Until next time, keep exploring and keep diving deep.